Hello. So this week we're gonna have a bit of a short post. I'm working very hard on my finishing up my doctoral thesis now. So this week especially is sort of pretty intense. Um, and so we're gonna do something a bit short, but still hopefully thought-provoking. The Midrash in our parsha, at the beginning of the parsha, it says "V'hayal Ekev tishmeun." When if you listen to my commandments, to the commands that I give you in the Torah. And then the Midrash goes off talking about um, the rewards that we get or will get when we do the mitzvot. And it relates to a very famous issue, which sort of is discussed in different um, philosophical texts, about the fact that we actually aren't told what the rewards will be for the mitzvahs that we do. Meaning, we're generally told that God will reward us. Um, it's not clear exactly in what way, or when will this reward will come. We know the famous, debates about the problem of there being evil in the world, and how is that possible, right? If you say that God is just and does justice in the world, then the rewards of the just, of the righteous, don't seem to come in this world. And so it's it's a topic that demands its own sort of discussion on it, several discussions. The Midrash here, though, is specifically troubled with the fact that some sort of reward description doesn't appear. Meaning, the Midrash is over here would be okay if the reward would be defined as something that would happen perhaps in the world to come, perhaps after you pass away. But the fact that there's no reward, no description of sort of what mitzvah is more important than the other, and therefore, gives the person who does it more rewards, why doesn't that appear? So the Midrash says the following thing. It says, brings the, I'll skip a little bit ahead. Tani Rabbi Chia. Mashal. Rabbi Chia says it's a parable. It's like, let me explain to you why God doesn't tell you what the reward of the mitzvah is. What is this thing like? Lemelech, shayalo pardes, v'yechnis bo poalim. A king who had a field, not a field, he had a sort of a place where you plant trees, okay, a field of trees. V'yechnis bo poalim, and he brought in their poalim, he brought their workers to work this tree garden. He had all sorts of trees, but he didn't tell them which one is worth more and which one is worth less. He didn't tell them which, because if they knew the value that would come from each one of these trees, they would only take the trees that are priced high, give the most reward by planting them, and only plant those. נמצאת מלאכת הפרדס, מקצתה בטלה ומקצתה קיימת. And then only part of the trees would be planted, and the rest would not. כך לא גילה הקדוש ברוך הוא שכר כל מצווה ומצווה. That's why God didn't tell us the reward for each mitzvah. שאילו גילה נמצאו המצוות מקצתן הקיימות ומקצתן בטלות. That if God would have told us what the rewards were for each mitzvah, we would only do the important ones. And then we wouldn't do the rest, and so that would not be good. Okay, so for example, if you knew that, for sure, if you knew that honoring your father and mother was more important than, lighting, not lighting candles, but let's say giving tzedakah, then you would invest all your money in helping your parents and forget about tzedakah. Okay, because it gives you the most. Okay, so the Midrash repeats this message several times in different language, but I think we're going to stop here. So The question I want to ask about this is, or first of all, let's try and understand better what it's saying. So the simple thing is that it's saying is that if we thought that there was one mitzvah that was more important than the other, then we would simply do only the mitzvot that were important, and not the ones that are not important. This is sort of an economical statement. Okay, so those who are capitalists among us, or people that are economists, would completely understand this argument. The argument says that people, humans, are rational beings, and if they know that they can invest in two things, whether it's a monetary investment or in this case it's a spiritual investment, then it's best to invest in the things that generate the most reward, the most value. And so if they were given a list of mitzvot and told sort of the individual value of each mitzvah on its own, then they would try to maximize their spiritual profits, okay, by doing the mitzvot that are most important. And then you'd have basically this fleeing of value to the top, okay, to the top 10% of the mitzvot in terms of their value, and all the rest would get chucked aside. But there's two things to understand about this. First of all, why didn't God say that all the mitzvot have the same value? Right? We could have just done that. Then there wouldn't be any distinction, and we could just focus on on doing all of them, right? So of course you could say, but it's not true, right? These aren't all the same. But even that is a bit tricky. Meaning, if God cares about all the mitzvot being done, then in some sense they're all equally important, right? Obviously, He wants it to all be done. If this value that we're talking about, well, why is it that a person would get more or less reward per mitzvah? I'm putting aside now the individual aspects of the mitzvah. Like, for one, giving tzedakah might mean more or less. I'm not talking about that. The Midrash is talking about that. The Midrash is saying not that every mitzvah is judged individually for the person. It's saying, I don't want to tell you what the value is of the mitzvah, even though that value exists and is well defined somewhere in God's mind. So it's a bit tricky, right? If the trickiness is that if we start thinking about it, we don't really understand the answer of the Midrash. If the value of a mitzvah reflects its importance, then why is it that God doesn't want us to focus on the important mitzvahs, right? I mean, there's a reason in the economy and commerce why one thing costs more, one thing costs less, and it's exactly designed to sort of emphasize the importance or the significance or the value of that thing, right? So here too, if all the mitzvot are equally important, okay, then they're all equally important. But the Midrash isn't saying that they're equally important. It's saying they're not equally important, but still God wants you to do all of them, and not to know sort of which one is important, so that you do all of them. So that's a bit strange. Okay, so I hope that I'm being clear over here. The first question is, to try and understand why God doesn't want us to focus on the other mitzvah. And then that question gets compounded by the question, how does this connect with the value of the mitzvah? In other words, if the mitzvah is indeed more valuable, mitzvah A is more valuable than mitzvah B, and that is expressed by the reward one gets when you do that mitzvah, why? Why doesn't God want you to focus on the more important mitzvahs than the actual mitzvahs? So I think that the answer is twofold. Okay, it's not twofold. There's like two aspects to the answer. First of all, why didn't God just say that they're all equal? That all the mitzvot have equal value. Why is He saying no? They're each different, but I'm not telling you the value, because I believe that has a much stronger effect than saying they're all the same. If you say they're all the same, then what is going to impact me as a person, what mitzvah I do? Well, because the spiritual benefit of giving tzedakah is identical to that of honoring my parents, I'll do whatever's easier for me, right? Because God is telling me He doesn't care. The reward is equal. So I'll just do whatever's easier for me. And eventually I'll flood, not flood, but I will, just like if we knew the value, we'd all go to the ones that are the most important. Now we'll all go to the ones that are easiest for us. But God doesn't want that either. He wants all the mitzvot to be done, right? And so, by telling us there is a value, and it's a differential value. It's not uniform. But I won't tell you what the value is. That every mitzvah you do could be the most important mitzvah, and you can't know if it's not, right? So that means that now you have to be careful with every mitzvah that you do, because you can't even miss one. That might be the one that is the most important one, and if you don't do it, then you've lost 90% of what this world has to offer, right? So, especially, precisely by not telling us the value of the mitzvahs and not saying that they're all the same, God generates a individual respect for each mitzvah, giving it sort of like, as if it was the only mitzvah in the world. Now comes the other question. Why is it really that God doesn't want us to sort of differentiate between the mitzvahs? I think that, and if He doesn't, why is there a different reward for it, right? For each mitzvah. I mean, but why is there a different reward if they're all equally the same, equally important? I think that we can explain this by the tension between this world and the world to come. In the world to come, which is sort of the world of truth, there is differentiation. Meaning some mitzvot indeed have more meaning than others. And that doesn't mean that the reward only comes in the world to come. It just means that in its deep spiritual meaning, there might be differentiation. I mean, of course, if we pop out even a step further, all this thing is a game, right? We don't really exist. Only God exists, etc. I'm not even going there. I'm saying once we exist, once the world exists, different things have different value. But God is interested in all the mitzvot being done because He cares also not only about the world to come, and not only about the spiritual side of things, but also about this world, about the world we're in now. If we all fled to honoring our parents and gave no tzedakah, this world wouldn't be able to survive well. The mitzvot aren't only operating on a spiritual level; they also operate in this world on a social level, right? A lot of the mitzvot also have impact on the people around us when they're alive, not just after they die. And so, because God cares about this world, which is within itself a very interesting phenomenon, right? So He specifically doesn't want you to know which mitzvah is more important, so you do all of them, because to do all of them is something that is necessary for the correct operation of this world. And without that, this world won't necessarily function like it's supposed to. So God hides the meaning of the mitzvot to make sure that you do all of them. Not only because each of them touches upon, because each of them touches upon different aspects of life, and the whole is greater than just the sum of its parts. Okay, and so to summarize, in our MyDrash, we saw this question about sort of why the mitzvot don't get, we don't get like a list of their value, and we said that this is both on a pragmatic reason, but also a fundamental reason, right? So a pragmatic reason in the sense that by not telling us the value, every mitzvah gets the full importance of all the mitzvot, and also that God is interested in all the mitzvot because the complete picture is worth more than everything, especially in the way that it impacts the world around us. You can't just take mitzvot separately and just do one. The rest of them also have an important value for the way that this world operates, and because God also cares about this world and not only about the world to come, He wants us to do all of that. Have a good Shabbat. Till next week.